68% of women and girls believe if they see themselves visually represented, it encourages them to try a new sport. That's why, to help inspire the next generation of female cricketers and drive further visibility of women's sport, Metrobank and the ECB have created a new photography bank of high quality images of women's and girls cricket. The images will be accessible to local cricket clubs free of charge via the ECB Resource Hub, with professional standard imagery available to use across websites and social media channels to assist with the formation of new teams and recruitment of players. To find out more, check out the link in the description. Hello and welcome to the Wisden Women's Cricket Weekly podcast. Something a little bit different today as part of our wider series on the first quarter of the 21st century. Today we are picking our ODI XI of the century so far. We'll also be reacting to the last few days in the 100 and the news that Dane van Niekerk has come out of international retirement just a month away from this year's World Cup in India and Sri Lanka. I'm Rana, and with me today, as usual, is Katya Witney, but also Raf Nicholson, women's cricket writer, journalist, and historian. Raf, great to have you on. Are you looking forward to having your selection hat on?
Yeah, I'm really excited. I don't know whether some of my picks might be controversial, but that's the joy of this process.
Well, let's kick off with some news from the 100. We're recording this on Wednesday morning, but we already know who will be in this weekend's knockout. Southern Brave are through to the final. They're unbeaten, 7 from 7 so far. They will play the winner of Northern Superchargers versus London Spirit in Saturday's Eliminator. If there is a washout, as the forecast suggests there may be, the Superchargers will go through, having finished higher in the table. They thrashed the Originals in the Northern Derby yesterday. Raf, can or will anyone stop the Brave? They look so good and just seem so much better resourced and have greater depth than everyone else in the competition at the moment.
Yeah, it's really interesting, given how kind of disappointing their campaign was last year, that they've managed to turn it around in quite such phenomenal fashion. It almost feels a little bit like kind of the roots that Charlotte Edwards has laid over the last few years are sort of coming good again. And I think that it is going to be difficult to look beyond them for this year's title. Obviously, Sophie Devine for them has been a brilliant kind of pickup. Yeah, and obviously Lauren Bell is bowling brilliantly, which is great news for England ahead of the World Cup. So yeah, it's difficult to look beyond them, I think.
Katya, how do you see it?
Yeah, I agree with Raf. I can't see Northern Supercharger. Sorry, I can't see anyone going past Southern Brave. They just seem so consistent. I mean, obviously they're unbeaten in the competition, and it just seems like everything. When you look at the teams, they look like the most complete team. There's very few weaknesses you can pick in that side. And having had those kind of really difficult years after starting the competition so strong when it did start, it does feel a lot more like they're coming out of that now. And I know obviously she's not doing it anymore, but it does look a bit like a Charlotte Edwards team. So yeah, I can't really see it unless the weather comes into play, which it probably will. That's probably the only way that there's going to be a different outcome in my book.
I suppose with a format that's so short, there's always room for volatility in games. And I guess even though the Superchargers and Spirit aren't quite as don't have quite as much depth as Southern Brave, there's obviously enough talent there to cause an upset. So looking at the Superchargers and you look at their overall numbers this season, Grace Ballinger's had a breakout comp with the ball, 23-year-old left arm seamer. Kate Cross obviously has a point to prove. She was really good yesterday. Lindsay Smith, Annabelle Sutherland, Nicola Carey. There's a lot of high class in that team. And then London Spirit, they've got that young core in the bowling attack, Dean, Glenn, Wong and Knott. And then one of the breakout players of the tournament, I think, Kira Chatley at the top of the order. When she's gone well, she's gone really well. And then you've got Grace Harris. She's obviously Grace Harris. So if she comes off, she can win a final on her own. And Georgia Redmayne's been really dependable. So yeah, Southern Brave, the favourites, but you can see them. You can see a world in which they are challenged. Raf, you're someone who covers only women's cricket, and given that we've got you on the podcast, I wanted to ask: does it frustrate you sometimes that in all the discourse around the 100, that so often the women's competition is essentially ignored? So, people will say and point to various perceived negatives around the men's competition, and they'd advocate wholesale change without even referencing the fact that the women's competition has not only been successful from year one, but continues to grow. You look at the attendances year on year, women's attendances go up and up.
Yeah, it does frustrate me quite a lot. It just feels like it's often an afterthought when people talk about and think about the 100. They go, oh, I really dislike it, or this bit of it's really great. Oh, also it has been really good for women's cricket. And it's like that isn't the but. The whole point of the 100 was meant to be that kind of sort of central tenet of gender equality. So yeah, that's frustrating, and especially now with the new owners, it just feels like so much of the conversation around that and so much of the interviews with these new owners have all been focused on what's going to happen to the men's competition, the male players, so that's kind of very frustrating. Yeah, absolutely.
Moving on, former South Africa captain Dane van Niekerk is once more available for international selection. She is unretired from international cricket. In a statement on her Instagram page, she said, "I've decided to revoke my retirement from international cricket, and that the time away has reminded me just how much I've missed representing my country." She also said, "I sincerely apologise to Cricket South Africa and the cricket family for how I handled my retirement, and I'm deeply grateful for the opportunity to hopefully one day express my skills on the international stage." Van Niekerk, 32, has not played international cricket for nearly 4 years now. She was controversially left out of South Africa's squad for their home T20 World Cup in 2023 after she failed to meet since relaxed fitness standards. She's part of a 20-player training group, of which you'd expect 12 to make the final World Cup squad. The other 3 players are currently taking part in the 100: Wolfart, Tryon, and Cap. So not a total given that she makes the final squad, but good to see her back in the training group. She's been in good form in the recent domestic stuff in South Africa. But Raf, I was looking at her numbers today. She's only played 9 ODIs in the last 6 years, and the game's changed so much in the time. Is it actually a given that we'll see her back in the World Cup squad in a month's time?
I don't think it's a given, but I do think that somebody at Cricket South Africa must have said to her that she's likely to be in line for selection. I mean, obviously she is in part of this camp, but the thing that most struck me about her post was the apology. Because previously she's always maintained that, and I don't know the truth of the situation, but she's always maintained that she was treated very badly by Cricket South Africa, and that's kind of been the whole conversation around it. Was it fair to impose these random fitness standards on her when that wasn't communicated effectively with her, and when she did everything in her power to meet I think it was the 2 kilometer time was the ostensible reason that she was omitted in 2023. So that apology to me suggests that somebody high up has said to her, you need to, if you say this, then you may well be selected. I'm quite surprised by it. It does, to me, South Africa have moved on. South Africa are a reasonably strong team. South Africa have a decent chance in this World Cup. And to then bring back somebody into the fold who there's been it kind of almost, first of all, it distracts from the rest of the team's preparation for there to be this ongoing big kind of story and talking point around it, but also the fact that somebody who has played such little cricket in the last couple of years to be part of that possible selection seems quite strange to me. But I won't be surprised if she is selected, because I think that apology is kind of almost like a precursor to that. That's what it reads like to me.
Yeah, Katya, how do you see it? I think Raf's point about how little cricket she's played, full stop, is a good one too. She's barely played any cricket since, I think, 100 in 2023. She's played some domestic cricket in South Africa, but she's not been picked up in a franchise cricket in 2 years.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of points that it brought home to me. I think one, that international cricket is still the best shop window to get selected in franchise cricket. I guess when she first retired, she was playing in the 100. She played a bit for Sunrisers over here as well under the regional system, and she was playing in other franchise leagues as well. And that's kind of really dried up. So when you're an overseas player, particularly when you're an overseas player from South Africa, I guess as well, it's going to be quite hard to keep your name at the top of those lists if you're not consistently playing international cricket. And I kind of saw this as a little bit of a acknowledgement of that I mean, obviously, I'm sure that she really wants to represent South Africa again. And, anytime you watch Dane van Niekerk on the field, you have no doubt how passionate she is about South African cricket. But there's also that to kind of consider for it. It did kind of surprise me, I guess, building on what Raf said about they've kind of moved on. They've got this young core of players who reached the final of the T20 World Cup last year, and they've got some real breakout stars. We saw in the series in the West Indies as well. There are a couple of younger players that they've got coming through. And it did seem quite surprising that they were going to go back, that they potentially could go back to Van Niekerk. Because when you think about the time of her retirement, there was a lot going on for Cricket South Africa. It wasn't that long after Lizelle Lee had retired as well, under the kind of standards of fitness umbrella. And I think part of that 2K time that was referenced was also that she was returning from an ankle injury, and it was just all very, very murky. And that was also the time where South Africa had gone through several captains in the intervening period. So it almost does feel like a nod back to that time. Or I don't know, there's just something a bit odd about reselecting someone who you've so clearly moved on from, or potentially reselecting someone you've so clearly moved on from and actually found success afterwards. But it's an opportunity to see Dani van Niekerk in a World Cup, so I guess it's good from a fan's point of view, even if it does read as slightly disjointed.
I suppose from a purely cricketing point of view, you're looking at the configuration of that South Africa 11, and that recent success has predominantly been in T20 cricket. They've reached the last two World Cup finals in T20 cricket. And if you look at that order, you'd say there are probably a few players who are more suited to T20 cricket. And other than the two absolute superstars in Wolfart and Cap, you can see how there probably is room for improvement somewhere in that top six. And obviously, Van Niekerk offers a lot with the ball too. So yeah, I guess my surprise is more just how late it is in the cycle. Is literally on the eve of the World Cup. World Cup literally starts in a month and 2 days time, and I think that is what is surprising. There's been so much time up until now for the decision to have potentially been made before. Finally, on the news front, Katya, you spoke about the unideal situation facing fans at the World Cup on last week's show, in that they've not actually been able to purchase tickets. But to make matters worse, there's been a late venue change. So Navi Mumbai has replaced Bangalore as a host city. Bangalore has been stripped of its hosting rights after 11 supporters died in a crowd crush after RCB won the IPL earlier this year. It means that the DY Patil Stadium in Navi Mumbai, which is next to Mumbai, will host 4 or 5 games, depending on India's progress to the knockouts. Guwahati will host 4 or 5. Visakhapatnam will host 5. Indore will host 5. And Colombo in Sri Lanka will host 11 to 13, again, depending on how India and Sri Lanka get on. On one level, I suppose it's good that the DY Patel has games. It's one of the few grounds in India that's hosted loads of international women's cricket, and it's near a mega city in Mumbai. But the other Indian venues, as we've mentioned before, are basically untested for women's cricket in terms of how popular they will be. Raf, it's kind of mad that there's so much uncertainty around how fans can watch the World Cup. I mean, there's a good piece in The Guardian early this week where it was referenced, the chat on a women's women's supporters group on Facebook, where people on it were saying it's basically impossible to organise a trip out there at the moment, and that affects the overall spectacle of the competition. If there are few people in their seats, it makes the atmosphere worse, and that's a worse spectacle on the TV.
Yeah, it's really disappointing. It feels like this is a huge opportunity for the women's game, to have a World Cup in India where the sport has just grown in popularity so much since the last time they hosted the 50 over World Cup in 2013. And back then, women's cricket was just a completely different landscape. So a huge opportunity, and it feels like it's being squandered because people just aren't going to have been able to have made arrangements. If they have, they're now going to have to scrabble around. I mean, I think from a freelance journalism perspective as well, it's less than ideal. The ICC say, oh, we want more journalists coming to cover women's World Cups and women's global events, and this kind of thing happens. So I'm covering it from home. But if I wasn't, then it would be a very, very expensive rearrangement because I would have already put all of my travel arrangements in place. And that's frustrating too, because, the women's game needs coverage. And it needs people to be following it, and both from a media and a fan perspective, to have the schedule change like this at the last minute. I mean, and it doesn't just impact this World Cup in a way, it makes people reluctant to put in place any travel arrangements to any future women's global tournaments as well. And given that we're at such an important stage in terms of growing the game, and we want to encourage people, fans, journalists to travel to tournaments, it's just really, really disappointing.
From your understanding, Raf, whose fault is this? We've got a T20 World Cup here in England next year, and I'd like to think this won't happen. We already know where the games are going to be played. There's a massive drive to ensure that we sell out as many seats as possible. Um, this is another ICC event. Why is it so different?
It's a really good question. Obviously, the kind of ostensible reason has been that that the particular kind of state authority in charge of the stadium weren't able to obtain the sort of necessary security clearance, and so from the ICC's perspective, the safety of fans and players is incredibly important. So that's the reason that's been given. I don't have any further information.
But Katya, it is just immensely disappointing. And it sort of feels more generally that World Cups are just viewed as a broadcasting tick box exercise. The deals go, we put them on, we get our money back. But as Raf said, this is a massive opportunity, and we've seen a lot of interviews with players at the moment in India and outside India, just about how much an opportunity this would be if this is an epic tournament. It still could be, right? The cricket can still win us over, but it seems at the moment we haven't had every opportunity to nail it from a spectacle point of view.
Yeah, and I think Phil kind of alluded to it on the show last week that it just feels like it is all about broadcast rights. It's not necessarily about getting bums on seats, getting fans through the doors, and perhaps there's a kind of underlying non-confidence that they were ever going to get fans through the doors, which in my mind is completely misplaced. I said it again on the show last week. India hosted the Men's World Cup in 2023. They're hosting the Women's World Cup now, and they're hosting the Men's T20 World Cup next year. That is a massive opportunity to have a huge drive. Almost like if you want to borrow the language of the new county system in the 100, two teams, one country. If you make a big deal about that you're hosting all those three, that is a huge marketing opportunity that I feel like is missed. Obviously, that terrible event that happened in after the IPL this year, it's completely understandable why those venues have had to be changed. But why has it been left this late to change them? There should have been a unilateral decision taken shortly after that, or much more in advance of the tournament, that they could not host events there, and particularly to change the final this late as well. If there's one game that people are going to buy tickets for, or journalists are going to arrange flights for, that's going to be the game that people are going to have booked in their diaries months and months in advance. It feels like that is the biggest problem with this, that final has been changed so last minute. But yeah, it is really disappointing that it just feels like it's kind of all been rushed towards the end of it.
On next week's show, we'll do a bit more of a breakdown on some of the squads that have been announced in the last week, but we must press on to more pressing matters. That is our ODI 11 of the 21st century so far. The way we're sort of going to do it is we're going to go through the teams that we've all picked, going through positions, openers, three, middle order, etc. A couple of rules I'm going to impose first up. We need an all-rounder, at least one all-rounder. We can have more than one, but we need one all-rounder, and we obviously need to have someone who can keep wicket. And we'll go from there, and we'll look at the breakdown of exactly who our bowlers are, perhaps depending on who our all-rounders are as well. Raf, do you want to kick off with your openers? One thing I found quite interesting when trying to pick this myself is just how much women's ODI cricket has actually changed in 25 years. So if you look at the average run rate in 2001, it was 3.38 runs and over. So that's an average score of 169. In 2025, it's more than 5 runs and over. It's something like 255 is the average score. That is a massive change. So when you're looking at who the best players are, you have to take that into consideration. Someone striking at 75 to 80 in 2001 is actually ahead of the game compared to someone striking at that level now.
That's true. And I think that one of the criteria that I've sort of applied to my selections are people who sort of transcended different eras and were able to be successful across different eras, because I just think the way that women's cricket and women's ODI cricket has kind of evolved, as you say, over the last 25 years, it's it's quite an achievement if you've managed to straddle both sides of that kind of pre-professional and now professional era. So my and the other thing I just wanted to say about openers is when you look at the list of leading run scorers, so many of them are openers. And so it's actually really hard, because so often in women's ODI cricket, what teams do is have their best batters at 1 and 2, right? And so it's really hard to pick openers. So shall I tell you my two?
Go for it.
Okay. So I've gone with Charlotte Edwards and Susie Bates. Um, Charlotte Edwards, I mean, so she's second on the list of leading run scorers in ODIs. Incidentally, she would also be my team captain. I don't know if we're naming that. I think as she's definitely somebody who kind of spanned the eras. So playing her first ODI in 1997 and her final ODI in 2016. It's just kind of the weight of runs, isn't it, and the consistency there. I've got Susie Bates from New Zealand opening up alongside her. So she's third on the list of leading run scorers. But she also did that. She played less ODIs than numbers 1 and 2. My abiding memory of Susie Bates in ODI cricket is the fact that in 2013 she was player of the tournament in the World Cup, despite the fact that New Zealand finished fourth, which just shows you kind of the kind of immense influence I think that she had, and obviously she's still playing, so continues to have on that team, and just the way that she's kind of stood out head and shoulders above many other players. So those are my two openers.
Katya.
So I've picked neither of those two. I think my selection criteria differed slightly in that I prioritized performances against Australia, England, and India, and I also prioritized form in different countries, as well as performances in big matches and tournaments. And for those two reasons, I've gone with Belinda Clark and Smriti Mandana, so two opposite ends of the era. I'll address Mandana before getting to Clark, but for Mandana, she will finish her career as the best ODI opener of all time, possibly across formats. And I think she has already done enough to be considered in this best of all time 11, which is crazy when you think she's still in her late 20s. But in terms of the weight of runs, the volume of centuries, the very few holes in her record against different sides, I think there's very few people who you can look at and say all of those criteria apply for them, especially at the top of the order and especially in global tournaments. So she's kind of my modern pick, if you like. And then Belinda Clark I really struggled with, because I wanted to pick her initially, and then considering she spanned the criteria of the 21st century, so she was playing in the 90s and then into the early 2000s, retired in 2005. For me, her innings in the 2000 World Cup final, Australia actually lost that, but Belinda Clark scored 91, I think, in that final. And if you want a big match player to score you runs in big match, you're going to struggle to go further than Belinda Clark. Just in terms of also what she means for Australian cricket and the driving force she was behind that side, it's almost like a kind of Charlotte Edwards equivalent for Australia. So for me, I've kind of gone two ends of the era, thinking about balance, for Smriti Mandana as a nod to the future and Belinda Clark as kind of that player who dominated the early 2000s kind of era.
Interesting. Well, perhaps helpfully, I went for Bates and Mandana. So one from each of you. I think with Mandana, the thing I completely get, Raf, what you were saying. The thing that tipped it over the edge for me was that I think Mandana, she's going sort of Lanning vibes in terms of just the volume of runs that she's scoring. She's averaged more than 55 in 4 separate calendar years. And with Bates, similar to you, Katya, I was looking at performances in World Cups, and Bates averages 56 in World Cups. Raf, I wanted to just throw a name at you actually. When I was looking at the numbers, one name came up that I've heard of and seen in lists and heard people talk about, but I didn't see myself. Karen Rolton played until 2009. Her numbers are amazing. In World Cups, she averages 78. Do you think she's got a good claim to this 11?
She isn't in mine, but she certainly has definitely got a claim to being in it. She's one of those players that I never saw live, but people just talk about her kind of legendary status. And one of the issues that we have is, before about 2005, we have so little footage of women's international cricket. So you're kind of casting around going, oh, like what was she like? And you read accounts. And what something people often say is she would have been a brilliant T20 player because she was so aggressive, and that she was therefore kind of before her time. But you're right that she's so near the top of so many of these lists of leading run scorers. Centuries hit in important moments, and certainly a really huge part of the immense success of the Australian team in the late 90s, early noughties.
Obviously, we must remind listeners and viewers that this is just a bit of fun. So if you disagree with us, let us know in the comments, but it's just a bit of fun. But I think for the sake of ease, let's go with Bakes and Mandana because that's sort of they each got two picks, if that makes sense. So that's
And those
probably
are
the
your
easiest way.
picks.
Yeah, that's a happy coincidence. Moving on to the middle order. So let's hear your number 3 to number 6, and oh yeah, 3 to 7, and you've got to include an all-rounder and a keeper in there. At least one all-rounder and a keeper in there. Katya, do you want to go first?
Okay, so I'll list them off to start with. I went with Mitali Raj at 3, Meg Lanning, Elise Perry, Nat Sciver-Brunt, and Sarah Taylor. That's the 7, right? Um, Sarah Taylor first. There's only one pick for keeper for me. I mean, when you look at the stats as well, Sarah Taylor is pretty much Sarah Taylor and Alyssa Healy are the only two keepers you could pick in that side. And for me, perhaps I'm slightly biased. I was a wicketkeeper growing up in the era where Sarah Taylor was keeping for England. And just in my mind, she's the best keeper that has ever played the game, and her batting as well. If you're talking about players before their time, I think you can also apply that to Sarah Taylor. She's the leading run scorer of all time among wicketkeepers in women's ODI cricket, 600s, the most hundreds of any wicketkeeper in ODI cricket. Yeah, there's just no one better in my opinion. The only thing I would say is that she's batting very low in my side. I'm not massively concerned about that. I'm very much happy to bump Sarah Taylor down if it means getting Elise Perry in above her. In terms of the three, so I toyed with the numbers 3 to number 6. I toyed with a few names. I really wanted to get Hayley Matthews in purely for, I guess, what we've talked about so many times with Hayley Matthews. She's a match winner. You always want Hayley Matthews on your side, whatever format you're playing, whatever match you're playing. I just couldn't get her in amongst Mitali Raj, Meg Lanning, and Elise Perry, unfortunately. So if you're looking at those three, Mitali Raj is self-explanatory. There are no holes in Mitali Raj's record whatsoever. She scored runs against absolutely everyone, and again is a complete great of the game. I also tried to get Stefani Taylor in, but if you're applying the criteria of getting runs against big teams, she doesn't quite fit in that criteria. There are a few holes in her record, notably against Australia and against England. I also tried to get, my openers weren't Susie Bates, so I tried to get Susie Bates in at number 3, but Mitali Raj edged her out. And then it's kind of like what I was saying earlier, the big name players. You want match winners on your side, and that's Nat Sciver-Brunt and that's Elise Perry for me. And obviously Meg Lanning kind of was a banker at 4. So that was the criteria behind my selection of 3-2-7.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's going to be any disagreement about Sarah Taylor, let's be honest. So I actually cheated a bit. So I'm probably going to be kicked out of the podcast in a minute. So I had Belinda Clark at 3, even though she didn't bat at 3 for Australia. So there you go. You can kick me out. I agree with Mitali Raj. I had her at 4. She kind of she played in a few different positions for India. Who else did I have? So I did have Elise Perry, but I had her further down at 8. I had Chamari Atapatu at 5. Again, probably cheating because she has normally opened for Sri Lanka in ODIs. But for me, kind of, there's something about context. And even though she isn't as high up in terms of the weight of runs that she scored, there's something about succeeding despite the structures around you and the kind of the blatant inequalities between the structures in places like Australia and England and in Sri Lanka. I just remember also that 178 not out that she hit in the 2017 World Cup, which was against Australia, which was just a phenomenal innings. I think in that match, like from memory, the second highest score was about 20. So yeah, it was just brilliant. So I had her in there, and I also had as one of my all-rounders, Mealy Kerr as well. She's certainly nowhere near done yet. She's still very young, but what she's achieved already is phenomenal. To beat that Belinda Clark batting record that stood for kind of 2 decades, and then to also just be so wily as a leg spinner, which is something that I feel like maybe she has sort of almost revived the art of leg spin in women's cricket to an extent, like somebody who actually genuinely turns the ball both ways and really bamboozles batters. So that's who I had.
So no Nat Brunt in your
No.
top 7. Interesting. I actually had exactly the same 3 to 7 as Katya did. I think for me, Raj's volume of runs and also what we were talking about with the openers, the era spanning quality as well, I think meant that she was a lock. But I had her at 4. She actually batted loads at 3 and 4. Meg Lanning averaged more than 60 at number 3, so she was 100% in. For me, Elise Perry had to be in, and I think she averages 60 between numbers 4 and 6. So I was comfortable having her there in the 11, and then Siva Brunt. The reason why I felt she had to be in is because not just the average, it's just hitting ability as well. The strike rate, when she's properly in nick, she strikes at around about 100. She's had several really standout performances against the best team in the world in Australia, including that extraordinary knock in the World Cup final 3 years ago, where we probably don't talk about it enough because England lost that game, but that is one of the greatest ever individual performances in an ICC final. So for me, Nat Brunt had to be in. I'm intrigued by with Mealy Kerr. I almost think that if we did this in 5 years' time, she'd have a really, really strong case to be in the 11. I feel like even though she's been around for a long time, she's just about to hit a peak. Like a sort of a consequence of the talent depth in New Zealand being slightly shallower is that she's played so much from such a young age that actually we forget that she is still so young. She's still in her early to mid-20s.
Can I ask a question about Nat though?
Yes.
Is she an all-rounder in your 11s?
Good question. So in my 11, she is the 6th bowler.
I'm not a controlling coach, so Nat can bowl whenever and however much she would like.
Yeah, we've not been promised anything from the ECB about her fitness for this 11, but we've been told that she should be fit. So yeah, Nat is my 6th bowler.
The way that I've done it is that Elise Perry and Nat Brunt make up the 5th bowler between them, pretty much.
Let's go back to this. I think how we end up 3 to 7 does slightly depend on how we go with the bowlers. So 4 bowling slots. I think because Raf has gone for a slightly different team configuration, I think we will have different answers for this. But in my team, I've gone 2 seamers and 2 spinners because I have the 2 seamers in the all-rounders up top. So let's start with the seamers. Raf, what seamers have you picked?
Okay, so because I had Mealy Kerr as one of my like all-round spin options, so I've got 3 seamers. So I already said Elise Perry. I had. I also have Julan Goswami and Catherine Fitzpatrick. I mean, I don't think you can have an all-time ODI 11. Sorry, a 21st century ODI 11 without Julan Goswami being in there. Most wickets. She kind of towers above other bowlers, both physically and metaphorically. Again, somebody who kind of has transcended eras. She made her debut in 2002 and then obviously retired only a few years ago. Catherine Fitzpatrick, again, like it's an interesting one because obviously some of her achievements were in the late 90s. But I feel, again, she's somebody who was ahead of her time. And, it's definitely one of those, like, if only we had an actual speed gun back then, because there's all this talk about who there was all this talk about who was going to be the first women's bowler to exceed 80 miles per hour. A lot of people think that Catherine Fitzpatrick may well have done that, but we just don't have it on record. So those were my seamers.
Helpfully, those were my seamers as well. I did, just from a statistical point of view, Goswami stands out as just the volume and again that era spanning quality. But Fitzpatrick, if you limit her career to the 21st century, she averages 16 and an economy rate of 3.1 runs and over. And that average in particular among seamers is just by quite a long distance the best. So in terms of how much dominance a seamer had in their particular era, I think she's the standout by quite some distance. Katya, how do you go?
So obviously Julian Goswami, I think we're all united on that completely. Probably the first name you all put on the team sheet. I think I've gone quite slightly controversial in that I've picked another all-rounder rather than a specialist seamer. I've picked Marizanne Kapp. I wouldn't want to pick an all-time team without Marizanne Kapp in it. She is a match winner in every sense of the word. If you're looking at big performers, you don't get any bigger than Marizanne Kapp. And if you look at the stats, someone who averages under 25 with the ball, has 3 ODI centuries, averages almost 35 with the bat. You don't kind of get those numbers from another seam bowling all-rounder. And if I was playing a World Cup final and I was allowed to select whoever I wanted, the first player on that team I would select would be Marizanne Kapp. So that was my reasoning behind picking Kapp. And also, if thinking of the configuration of my team, there is Elise Perry in the middle order and Nat Sciver-Brunt. I didn't actually select them as all-rounders. I selected them more on the weight of runs that they've scored. So I felt like I could have that luxury of having Marizanne Kapp further down the order. Again, another player who's batting further down at number 8 than I would ideally like, but I would just want Marizanne Kapp in my side every time.
How close was Kapp to your 11, Raf?
Yeah, pretty close. I think everything that Katya said is absolutely fair. Yeah, I mean, it's not much to argue with. What's interesting about Elise Perry, though, is that I'd like early Elise Perry for the bowling and late Elise Perry for the batting. So could we like conglomerate the two and then she can actually be in the side as an all-rounder?
I think we can, genuinely. I think we can, and I think that for me the brutal thing with Kat is that she's up against Sciver-Brunt and in particularly more like for like Perry. And I suppose I know that Kapp has been around for a really long time, but has she been as dominant as Perry for such a long time? And as you say, Raf, in two different disciplines over time, I'm not sure. But then for me, Sciver-Brunt got in just because of the extra element with the power and destruction when she's at her best. So yeah, I mean it's really difficult. Maybe we can have all three in, but then I think you have to have Goswami. I think you have to have Fitzpatrick. I think Fitzpatrick is almost a landing of bowling attack where her numbers are so much better than the rest that she's got to be in. But yeah, tricky. Should we get to our spinners and try and work out what the actual team is at the end? Katya, who do you go for in the spin department?
I went for Anisa Mohammed, who I think is kind of self-explanatory. She's the leading wicket taker among spinners. I think 7 fifers across her career. There's a few other spinners who come close to that. The other spinner I would naturally select would be Sanamir. However, I've actually gone for Neetu David to have some variation of angle from bowling with different arms. Also, I love Neetu David so much, and all the stories of her career that I've heard from doing different interviews and writing different articles. I find just that her kind of story arc as a spinner and as a player for India is incredible. And there are very few players who have that kind of stats that she has. So she's the only player in the top 5 wicket takers among spinners in ODIs who played fewer than 100 matches. She's the only one in that top 5 who averages less than 20 with the ball. She averages 16.34. And her economy rate is also 2.8. So I've put Neetu David as a lock in my side as well.
Oh, I so nearly selected Neetu David. Again, like Anisa Mohammed as well. Like, it's difficult to argue with somebody who is the leading spinner in terms of wicket taking in women's ODIs. But this is probably a bit controversial, but I have gone for Sophie Ecclestone. Obviously, still playing. It's partly about what she's going to do, but it was also about what she's already achieved. in not very many matches, she is going to finish as the leading wicket taker of all time in women's ODIs, like assuming, bar a kind of catastrophic injury. So I just think that what she has done already in her role has been so impressive.
Yeah, I think for me, Eccleston was a banker just because, again, just thinking about the era she's bowling in, she's the one who's playing in this era where 250 is becoming a par score, and her economy rate is 3.68 runs and over. I think that is it's like so far better than what the era average is. So for me, Eccleston had to be an average of under 20. Anisa Mohammed, I was tempted by, but she if you split her record based on who she played against, then her numbers look very, very different. So she played loads of qualifiers. So, for example, she averages 65 with the ball against Australia, and played a lot of qualifier cricket which she completely dominated. But against the very best teams in the world, her record wasn't quite as strong. So for me, she couldn't quite make the 11. Neetu David was the one that I very nearly picked. So for reference, her ODI numbers in the 21st century are nuts. So 126 wickets at 15.65, an economy rate of under 3 runs and over. The only player with a significant number of games behind them to be under 3 runs and over. Again, so this is where I differ from both of you. I actually ended up picking, and again, this is cheating, so feel free to discount it. I ended up picking Ash Gardner in my team because if I was thinking of players who have defined the century, I think she is, as an all-rounder, someone who has changed the way that women's cricket is played. She is used in unusual roles as a spinner, often bowls at the death. She's an amazing fielder and she strikes at 107 with a bat in ODI cricket, and that is just something that no one else really in the game has done. It feels like when Australia are playing their best, it looks like they're playing a game at a different level to everyone else, and a big part of that for me is Ash Gardner. So I wanted to find a space for her in the team somewhere. But I really couldn't decide between David and Gardner. I just went Gardner. David, her numbers with the ball, amazing, and literally incomparable. But Gardner for the all-round package and how she's, I think, one of the more significant figures in the game more generally. She had to get in for me. Has anyone having heard other people say stuff changed what they think?
Well, I think for you two, when we were talking about the middle order, I mean, obviously I'm outvoted, I think. So that's fair enough. If you want to include Nat, I mean, who am I to argue?
I think I would be, maybe this is also controversial. I think I'd be happier to see Nat go for a Tramari Atapati figure if Neetu David was in the 11. That's how strongly I feel about Neetu David. I completely understand the case for Sophie Eccleston. I really, really do. But I think if we're selecting based on weight of numbers, I think at this point in their career, and I do understand what you're saying about players who are going to go on and define records for women's cricket, and Sophie Eccleston will break all of them. But I think if we're looking primarily at right now, I would have Neetu David in over Sophie Eccleston at this point in time.
I think we can a bit of compromise. I think we can find something that works. So I think if we pick the 3 to 7 that me and Katya pick, so Lanning, Raj, Perry, Siverbrunt, Taylor. So that means Perry's in the side and Raf picked Perry lower down. That means we have two spots for spinners. So Neetu David in, and then can we also have Sophie Eccleston?
Yeah, I mean, how are you going to get Ash Gardner in then?
But I think then if we're saying statistically, Neetu David has the most compelling record, and I think her and Eccleston have very similar cases in terms of how much better they are than their era. So I think a lot of people listening to this will be like, how can you have Eccleston in? I think if you just look at the raw numbers, David is comparably better than her era than Eccleston is. So I think that's fair enough. So then do we get Gardner in at 8?
I'm willing to sacrifice Marizanne Kapp if we're putting Gardner in.
So then, no, we've only got 2. So we've got Neetu David and Ash Gardner. So they're spinning the ball in different directions as well. And then we have 2 spots for seamers. I think it's got to be Fitzpatrick and Goswami. I think those 2. I mean, there are loads of amazing seamers we've not even mentioned. Megan Shute, Anya Shrubsole, Catherine Siverbrunt, so many. But I think those are the standouts. And therefore, I think we have a team, which is very exciting. So our team is Susie Bates, Smriti Mandana, Meg Lanning, Matali Raj, Elise Perry, Natsira Bunt, Sarah Taylor, Ash Garner at 8, and then the bottom three of Neetu David, Catherine Fitzpatrick, and Hulan Goswami. That's a really good team. Who's gonna beat that? Cool. That was good fun, and I think we found consensus quicker than I thought we would. So cheers, everyone.
That was far less argumentative than I thought it was going to be. I thought there were going to be some proper ding dongs over some selections, but maybe we do make.
I can't believe that we haven't got Charlotte Edwards in. You guys are going to be
Yeah.
persona non grata for future England press conferences.
Can we have Charlotte Edwards as our coach?
Yes. Although she hasn't actually won anything as an international team coach yet, but we'll just paper over that crack.
We could put Charlotte Edwards as a coach, and she's on her not probation, that's the wrong word. She's on her kind of like initial period until the end of the World Cup, and then we'll see where we are.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. That's a good way of squeezing Edwards in there. Thanks so much for joining us, Raf. That was really good fun, and I think we've got a good team. And I do agree with you. No Charlotte Edwards could cause a stir. But yeah, thanks so much for joining us today. That is everything from today's show. Thanks to Metrobank, girls cricket clubs can now access royalty-free images to promote women's and girls cricket within their community. If you want to find out more about the fund, visit metrobankonline.co.uk/cricket.